Well, should we move on?
Let's move on, sir.
Let's get the good general back here. Lieutenant General Raduege is next up as our moderator.
Our good friend.
Hello again, General. How you doing?
Good, sir. How are you?
Well, we're doing just fine. We're enjoying everything that we're sharing with all of our viewers and listeners today, and David and I are as fascinated as any of them. It's just great, some of the information that we've been able to learn from all of these incredible people like yourself. So I don't know what more to say than just we're delighted to have you be a part of the team, and thank you for all you continue to do, and certainly for being a part of this today.
Well, it's certainly been a magnificent day. And again, I just have to say thanks to America's Future Series, our sponsors, to Murray Media and everything for making this possible. And frankly, we've been in a planning mode now for this session, along with other sessions that we've already conducted over the year. But we knew from our committed speakers today that this was going to be an incredible event. And I have listened to every bit of it today from the beginning when we opened the doors. This series of speakers today have lived up to every anticipation that I had, and it's just been absolutely magnificent. And so I'd like to now bring on two individuals that I have the privilege of conducting a fireside chat with. Let me just do a sound check real fast. General Shaw, are you there?
General Raduege, I'm here. Hope you can hear me.
Very good, sir. We hear you. And Craig, are you there?
Yes, sir. I hear you loud and clear. Can you guys hear me?
Very good. We can hear you 5 by, as they used to say a long time ago in the communications field. So 5 by. Okay, well, let me just do a quick introduction of these two wonderful speakers here today. First off, for General Shaw. Lieutenant General John Shaw has served our nation in uniform for 31 years, and is currently the Deputy Commander of U.S. Space Command, which is the 11th and most recently established Unified Combatant Command, and they're responsible for conducting operations in, from, and to space to deter conflict, and if necessary, to defeat aggression, deliver space combat power for the Joint Combined Force, and to defend U.S. vital interest with our allies and partners. And yes, U.S. Space Command is a warfighting command. And I just have to mention the credentials today, just very quickly, in the education department of our two speakers, because General Shaw is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, having earned a Bachelor of Science in Astronautical Engineering and the Russian language, and also has a Master of Science in Aeronautics and Astronautics from University of Washington. So again, General Shaw, welcome to our fireside chat today. Mr. Craig Miller is the President of Government Systems at Viasat, a global communications company that believes everyone and everything can be connected through the power of their satellites. And Craig has served with Viasat now for over 26 years. He has an amazing history of beginning with Viasat and has moved through the ranks to his current position. Craig is a strategist, a pragmatist, a team builder, an innovator, and mentor with a demonstrated history of gestating, growing, and operationalizing businesses to rapidly provide customer-centric solutions in the communications, defense, and space industries. And again, Craig earned a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, Communications, and Signal Processing from the University of Arizona. And I might add that Craig has been a tremendous supporter of our America's Future Series events, both past and present. It's great to have you back again today, Craig.
General Raduege, General Shaw, thanks for having me here. It's my pleasure and honor to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion we're going to have today. And thanks to our sponsors at America's Future Series as well.
Great, thank you. Well, let's start off with a question that I'll pose to each of you. But first, General Shaw, how has U.S. Space Command as a combatant command worked to integrate with other combatant commands, especially key regional commands like U.S. European Command and U.S. Indo-PACOM?
Hey, so thanks. Hey, by the way, thanks for the introduction, General Raduege, and thanks to the folks that put on this forum. I think we're at the end of a really long and very impressive day of fireside chats and talks and such. And I wish I could have attended all of them. I look forward to seeing some of the readouts, but quite a day and quite a lineup. And we'll do our best. I know Craig and I'll do our best here at this particular fireside chat. So you ask a great question. How do we integrate with the other combatant commands? First of all, just worth pointing out that we're just over 2 years old as a combatant command. So we're still growing our muscle, right? We're still trying to stay, we're in adolescence, trying to stay coordinated on everything that we're doing as we get stronger all the time. And that's against a backdrop of an interesting thing that I've observed being on the job here for almost a year now, is that there's not a single other combatant command that isn't really interested in what U.S. Space Command can do for them. Every single one of them is in some way a customer of space, a user of space, and needs space. And so that's one of the nice things is all of our sibling combatant commands are all have open arms in terms of talking with us all the time. That's good. We do have, we do spend a lot of our time and focus finding out how we can support those other combatant commands. And as you pointed out, I think Indo-PACOM and EUCOM are near the top of the list of those ones that we want to make sure have all the space capabilities they need and any potential confrontation they might have with an adversary within their AOR. But we also recognize that we've got we have a global responsibility and a global reach. We're the only area of responsibility that touches all the others, of all the other combatant commands. So we do have not only a need to support them, but there's actually a physical connection with all of those other areas of responsibility. The way we're primarily doing that integration right now is through our joint integrated space teams that are co-located at all of the combatant command headquarters in those other 10 combatant commands. We've got teams at every single one of them. And their job day in and day out is to make sure that U.S. Space Command is providing that support to whatever that combatant command needs in their long-range planning, their near-term planning, or their actual operations of the day, or other associated activities such as, for example, intelligence. So we have those teams. That's our integrated framework. I think I should also point out that though General Dickinson, he has a lot of his own responsibilities, is responsible for the space area of responsibility, and he could be a support to commander as well. So that connection with the other combatant commands works both ways. So there could be instances where we actually need Indo-PACOM to support a U.S. Space Command scheme of maneuver in the space domain, or EUCOM to do that, or Special Operations Command. And so our integration that you asked me the question about is not only reaching and getting space into those other combatant commands, but it's also when we need them to help us to make sure that they're in track and we need to do, and we work together in a very effective mutual support relationship. Kind of a long answer to your question. There's probably a lot more we could go into, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, it's General Shaw. That was a great response. And as you started out, it brought back memories. I was actually a member of the initial U.S. Space Command, and I can remember the days when space wasn't understood by the other combatant commands or appreciated, frankly. So you've come a long way, and I think everyone now understands the real importance. Well, Craig, let me turn to you for a minute now. And as an industry leader, in the space domain. Do you work with other combatant commands, as General Shaw spoke about? And do you integrate and collaborate the satellites and communications you provide for the DoD across those commands? And finally, how do you see your industry doing this?
Yeah, and we do. And so at Viasat, we have a long history of working across the services and across a variety of different commands. And we work with SOCOM, EUCOM, NORTHCOM, and of course, INDOPACOM, providing services to all of them individually and together. And I think one of the things I'm really excited about is seeing both the Space Force and Space Command specifically taking an enterprise view of satellite communications. And I think one of the reasons that you saw COCOMs in some cases being stovepiped is the old way of buying SATCOM was basically you would rent a transponder and you throw down some terminals and you throw down a hub and you build a network, and you wound up with each of the COCOMs having their own network, their own hubs, their own NOCs, and you don't have an interoperable system. And one of the things we're really excited about is we're seeing this move towards an enterprise view of communications where these are bought as services. And when you buy as a service, you get access to more than just the satellite. You get the whole network, and you get the resources of an ISP basically providing you a network. So it's much like you would expect from Verizon or Comcast or anyone else. When you buy these as services, you get the full force of a global ISP like Viasat supporting you. And that makes it much easier to operate as an enterprise, to share data across different users and different domains, different geographies. And that's one of the things that we're really excited about from industry, is seeing the transition in business model and how SATCOM is provided to the government. I think these service-based offerings are going to create a lot more interoperability and allow different COCOMs, different services to act together as one force. And I think that's a part of it, is having that communications infrastructure that we support. And we see a lot more momentum in the industry towards cooperation as well. We have partners in the SATCOM space where we've stitched together a network that uses our own satellites as well as bandwidth from our partners. Sometimes it's KU band bandwidth, sometimes it's bandwidth at a different orbital regime, but we're able to provide a unified service. And I think we're getting to the point where we're going to see multi-vendor, multi-orbit, multi-band systems that are presented as a service for the government's use. And that will help integrate the COCOMs, because you'll have a worldwide capability that's resilient, available, and interoperable. And we're really excited about that trend in industry.
Thanks, Craig. You also brought back some memories of my time while I was in uniform in earlier days, and of what you just said. I was the U.S. Central Command J6 for 3 years, and I'll tell you, as I walked the terrain over in the AOR of U.S. Central Command, individual stovepipes by the military services were all over the place, and it drove me crazy as a J6 trying to pull all that together. And of course, now we are all thinking more now about the multi-domain operations of bringing together all of that for the benefit, frankly, of the warfighter and for the success of our mission. So thanks for that. Second question I wanted to tee up, and General Shaw, I'll send this to you. Secretary of Defense Austin recently charged U.S. Space Command with defining the tenets of responsible behavior in space. And so do you see an activity called UNCLOS, and what that is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, as potentially a framework to this model that you need to be creating?
Hey, thanks, General Raggi. So, before I answer that, let me talk a little bit more about General Dickinson's perspective of his area of responsibility. So this is interesting. In the former U.S. Space Command that you had an opportunity to serve in, there wasn't a defined area of responsibility for that combatant command. It was what we called back then a functional combatant command, right? Focused on getting those space services down to the terrestrial domains and combatant commands. Well, it's different now. We have a new command, has a new unified command plan from the president, and actually for the first time defines an area of responsibility. All of the other combat commands that have areas of responsibility are geographic in nature. They're defined by lines on the map. We call ours astrographic. It defines, it's basically that area that's at 100 kilometers and above with no upper limit defined. And that's our AOR. And so with that comes the responsibility of, okay, now we're responsible for it. We're responsible for the activity that goes on in there. And as you kind of start to look at that, and you really kind of try to understand what that responsibility entails, it involves doing professional operations within that domain, responsible operations within that domain. And so absolutely correct. Earlier this year, the Secretary of Defense signed a memo and in which it tasked actually U.S. Space Command for some follow-on work, but declared or proposed 5 tenets of responsible behavior that all spacefaring actors should consider as a form of professional and responsible behavior in the domain. For example, not causing unnecessary interference and staying on safe separations from other satellites and safe trajectories, and operating in a professional manner. And so, and now we have the task at U.S. Space Command to take all of these 5 tenets down to the next level of how would we implement them, and what would we now do as a matter of daily operation in space. So you talked about, so actually I think more than maybe the UN law of the sea, I think a more appropriate mechanism for us to look at would be the Incidents at Sea Agreement that the Soviet Union and the United States signed in the early 70s. And this agreement, so it stemmed from some incidents that occurred in the 1960s in various places around the globe between the Soviet and American navies, where ships got bumped to each other, or planes got too close, or maybe some ships from one side did practice attack runs on the opposing side's ships. And this was all in peacetime, right? And you could see that each side agreed, hey, we probably need to do something about this because it could lead to unnecessary escalation or misperception or miscalculation, and that could be bad for everybody. And so they did. They set an agreement that's actually still in place today between Russia and the United States that says kind of those things. You're not going to do simulated bombing attacks on the other nation's vessels at sea. You're going to do your best to be responsible and keep a safe distance. You'll make notifications if you're going to be doing something that the other nation probably should know about if it has ships in the vicinity. That's where I think a mechanism that does not exist today in space might be helpful for us going forward as it becomes more crowded with activity, as we have seen from potential adversaries that there are counter space activities that they're conducting or even testing counter space capabilities. We, similar to the high seas in the 1960s, are starting to get to where we might be running the risk of a miscalculation or misperception of activity in the space domain that could result in unwanted and undesired escalation in space, or even in broader domains. So I think that's kind of where I think we're headed. And I think these tenets of responsible behavior that anyone here in your audience, by the way, should be able to Google Secretary of Defense tenets of responsible behavior. I think you'll get to an OSD website that will get you that one-page memo. But I think this will be the foundation of that kind of framework that I think will serve us well, essentially forever, once we get it in place in space. No matter where we go or how deep we go, it'll be a framework for responsible behavior.
John, that's tremendous insight. And it also brings me back to some of the discussions we had during my time in Space Command. And of course, as you so accurately pointed out, we went from, and Space Command has gone from a functional command now to a combatant command with a defined AOR. I remember many discussions we had at trying to define where does space start, so that an AOR could be defined. So we've come a long way in in that regard. And so thanks for that. And of course, now space being officially recognized as the fourth operational domain also helps with all that discussion. Craig, let me turn to you real fast and say, and you spoke, and I remember it well, at America's Future Series event on October 28th about space safety and sustainability. And so what key responsibilities do you see that need to be established for space safety and sustainability? And what's the critical importance of laying out regulations for behavior in space worldwide?
Yeah, and as General Shaw pointed out, this is a problem that we're in the initial stages of, and it's a problem that we need to solve. And it's not just for this year or next year. This is an ongoing thing that's literally going to last forever. I couldn't agree more with that. And we need to understand what responsible behavior in space is. And the first step to that, in my opinion, is understanding the problem and creating a data-driven approach to understanding what behaviors in space are safe and what are not. And so we've seen a couple examples recently of some actors are behaving somewhat irresponsibly in space. And it's some governments and some commercial entities are basically behaving like it's the Wild West, and they're going to do whatever they want, and they're not considering the repercussions of their actions. And I think General Shaw pointed out very rightly that in some cases, this could lead to an escalation in warfighting. In other cases, it could lead to detrimental conditions in space that restrict free and fair access to space. If we get to a situation where there's too many objects in space and they start colliding with each other, which is a very real consideration, that could reduce access to space or even completely restrict access to certain orbits. And that's not in anyone's interest. But I think one of the issues that we're facing with that is it's not well understood what the boundary of safe use of space is, especially when it comes to congestion and orbital debris. And I think the first step is getting impartial, data-driven analytical models that help us understand the problem. And I think that's an effort that has to be done in concert with the private sector and the public sector. It's going to take universities and private industries and governments to basically agree on, all of the international community to agree on what responsible behavior is, how we measure it, and what actions we take to guarantee the free and fair use of space. And there's good examples of this. The way geostationary space is regulated with orbital slots that are largely, at least the spectrum pieces are largely regulated by the ITU, and there's international consensus that we're all going to play by the rules and we're going to use space so that everybody gets the maximum benefit out of that. Right now, there's no framework for that in any of the other orbits, and it's something akin to the Wild West. And that's not a sustainable situation, and irresponsible behavior will beget further irresponsible behavior. So I think it's in everybody's interest, the private sector, the US government as leaders, to show what responsible behavior is, set an example of responsible behavior, and then work in the longer term to create an internationally agreed framework for what responsible behavior is. And this is going to require coordination in the launch industry, spectrum access, both in the user and gateway side, orbital access, and even market access. And all those things together are going to have to be part of a consensus-based international framework that's fair to everybody. And the ultimate goal for all of this is to provide free and fair access to space so that all nations can leverage space to mankind's benefit, so that competition and innovation are stimulated because multiple entities have access to space and no one government, company, or group has domain or dominance over any given orbit or set of orbits. The goal of this is to, much like the law of the sea that we started with, to provide a free global commons for all mankind. And that's really the benefit of this. And the responsibilities are spread across everyone that uses space. This isn't something that the government owns completely. This isn't something that private industry owns completely. It isn't something that the US government and US industry own completely. It has to be an international agreement.
Great, thank you. General Shaw, turn to you now. General Dickinson, the US Space Command commander and your direct boss, has mentioned several times publicly that space domain awareness is key to protecting and defending the space domain. In what areas of development should industry most focus on if they want to partner?
Thanks, Jerry. Hey, first, before I answer that, I got to say, if you were hoping to get Craig and me to maybe disagree on this panel, get a little fight club going, so far, not a chance, because I agree with 100% of what he just said. I think we're in violent agreement. From my perspective, where we are, U.S. Space Command and the responsibilities of the AOR, and his perspective as a commercial enterprise within it, we both benefit from a framework of responsible behavior. And I would say it's the same in other domains, right? I think the U.S. Navy is as proud of its ability to conduct and do maritime operations professionally as is any merchant marine capability. It's really not all that different. It's not all that different. We've seen this before, and that's why I have confidence we can make it work. So to your question, so first of all, we should talk on space domain awareness. Let's first kind of talk about what that is. You know, for a long time, we talked about something called space situational awareness. And we only really kind of introduced this new term about 2 years ago. And the idea was space situation awareness had kind of evolved to be a practice of, okay, looking up, understanding where objects are in their orbits and kind of getting an idea where that is and identifying where there might be possible collisions and notifying owners. And it was sort of like an air traffic control in space kind of approach. As we started to realize that, you know, space is a military domain, it's an operational domain. Even before, just as we were standing up U.S. Space Command 2 years ago, we said, you know, we got to look at this like we do the other domains. There was such a thing as maritime domain awareness, which is focused on not only understanding what's going on, but understanding pattern of life. What are potential threats that are out there? What are the behaviors that are associated with what we're observing? What are the intents and purposes of various capabilities and platforms? So it's a broader look at, and it's a more of a military look. It's like we do in the other domains. And so that's what space domain awareness is. We want to understand what's happening in the domain, not only just from a observation of what's actually happening, but what is intent? What is a potential threat? And I think the way that's different and way anyway, basically anybody can help us, whether it's the commercial sector or the academic sector or wherever, is finding us the tools to actually achieve that. We don't want to pretend we know what all those tools are. There may be ones we haven't thought of yet. There may be predictive analytics that are observing what's actually going on the planet and therefore reveal some things of what might actually be happening in space. That's not really space situation awareness, that's space domain awareness, because it's giving me insight into what's happening in the domain. And I do not think we're even close to exhausting the technologies, the approaches, the creativity to trying to get after that problem. I probably should have led by also saying, it turns out our area of responsibility I described, it's really big. It has no upper limit. Even the relevant battle space that we're talking about today, in terms of what's relevant to General Dickinson, extends at least out to the lunar sphere, if not a little bit beyond that today. And that's not going to shrink, that's going to grow. So any tools that we can bring to bear from any provider and any innovative thinker that are going to help us with space domain awareness, we're eager to hear them.
Well, that's great. Well, let me just clarify first that I'm not looking for a fight in any way. So it's music to my ears to hear government and industry getting along so well. And I think we can move together quickly with that as the status. So, and also, I really appreciate, John, you explaining the difference between space situational awareness versus the new emphasis on space domain awareness and the examples that you provided, because that really brings it clear in my mind also. I worked with the space situational awareness concept and totally understand and appreciate where U.S. Space Command now has moved to in that regard in the evolution. Craig, please share your comments and thoughts on what General Shaw focused on with as to partner with the space domain awareness, and how is Viasat working to achieve those focus areas?
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on what General Shaw said earlier about the violent agreement. I think the root of it is we all share the same interest, and the government success is private industry success, and private industry success is the U.S. government success, and the U.S. as a country's success is the international community's success. And so we all share a common mutual interest in space, and that's what protecting it is about. And changing gears and talking a little about space domain awareness, I'll recount the highlights of an anecdote an event that happened earlier this year. And so Viasat participates in the Commercial Integration Cell along with several other companies out at Vandenberg as part of the Space Operations Center there. And there was a recent occurrence where an event using some of the space domain awareness tools occurred, and it was determined that this event could possibly affect some users of certain communication systems. And the partners, the commercial and industry partners in the government, worked together to determine what users and what missions might be affected. We were able to, as a group, present some options for the users, and in fact did move those users to a different system based on the event that happened. And this was a resounding success. And so this shows that commercial industry partners can work with the government to share information, share tools, and provide basically mission saving effects based on space domain awareness. The downside is that this took several rounds of emails, and the process I described had men in the loop the whole way, and it took hours. What we would really love to get to is a way to share data, and the interfaces or APIs and the tools that General Shaw spoke about, so that that data can be shared in real time, and we can make these kind of decisions in near real time. And so our OODA loop isn't several hours, our OODA loop is several milliseconds. And I think that's where industry can partner with government and help to create those interfaces that we use to share the data. Then the tools can ride on top of that data and make the decisions in machine time that we're going to need for true space domain awareness and true safety in space. And I think that's a really exciting area of how do we share that threat intelligence? How do we work as commercial partners together to share it? And then how do we share it with the government so that as a partnership, we can execute these kind of missions?
Great. Well, let's turn quickly to the fifth operational domain, that being cyber. General Shaw, I'd ask, how is U.S. Space Command partnering with the U.S. Cyber Command to protect vital space networks? That seems to be an increasingly critical bridge of partnership.
Yeah, so it absolutely is. So if you had to look at across the 11 combatant commands and try to see which ones are more closely related to the others, then U.S. Space Command and Cyber Command would be very close siblings, maybe even fraternal twins. And why is that? We have a lot in common. The first is that pretty much every other, as I mentioned earlier about space, it's the same for cyber. Now, pretty much every other combat command has a cyber need today and across the spectrum of what they do, the same way they have a need for space today and across the spectrum of what they do. A second thing we have in common with Cyber Command and General Nakasoni's team is we both have this global perspective, right? It's kind of space is relatively agnostic to those geographic lines that we draw on the globe itself. And cyber is the same way. It's kind of geographically agnostic. There may be servers in some countries and other countries, but overall, it's just, it's not driven by that. And so we find we have a lot in common when it comes to the demand signals placed on us to support the other combat commands, our perspectives on seeing things globally, and in the occasional need for us to both to be, as I mentioned before, to be supported commands in our respective domains in which we're operating. So Cyber Command doesn't have a physically described area of responsibility like we do with space and like the geographic combatant commands have. But it certainly is a domain, as you mentioned, that they are actively maneuvering in, and they have adversaries also actively maneuvering in that domain. So how are we working together? in many ways. So much of, I also say that cyber and space are BFFs. They're besties, right? Anything that's cyber technology that's at the cutting edge of that has immediate applicability to our business. And anything that's cutting edge in space is going to have an applicability to cyber. And we can walk through that in terms of either networks or artificial intelligence, or even, as I mentioned before, in terms of big data and predictive analytics, when you're looking at trying to absorb what's happening in your domain, whether it's space or whether it's cyber. So we realize that we have a lot of synergy. We work closely together, and there are instances in which Cyber Command can support us. And then there are instances in which space can be supportive to cyber. We call it space-enabled cyber operations. So I just say that's a partnership that is going to continue for a long time. I guess I should also point out we realize that one of the threats to space systems, aside from the ones that we kind of maybe see more directly in terms of directed energy or electromagnetic interference or even kinetic attack, is cyber attack. And our space systems, by their very nature, are not singular platforms, really. They're all networks. And so cybersecurity of those overall systems and enterprises is a very great concern to General Dickinson and one of our primary focus areas. Thank you.
You remind me that, network operations, and as you pointed out, all these space systems are increasingly being interconnected. I learned a long time ago in my career that you're only as strong as your weakest link when it comes to that. So, and as people today are demonstrating as they conduct cyber attacks on various activities, once you get in, even through third party or connections, you can get keys to the kingdom and access to the crown jewels of various organizations and capabilities, which is I can see why that's a major concern for our space systems. We didn't think about that a whole lot in the past, and so it's something that certainly needs to be addressed even more in the future. And it really seems evident to me with this question that I just asked General Shaw, that partnering with U.S. Cyber Command and related activities and agencies is really good business, since they've really developed such amazing capabilities for supporting national security throughout all 5 of our operational domains of land, air, sea, and cyberspace, which is sort of the sub-element of and subtitle of this America's Future series on national security. And in addition to supporting operations in all of those operational arenas, Cyber Command also has the means for defending and protecting critical national assets and our infrastructure. So again, it's good business to partner with U.S. Cyber Command. And just yesterday, and what was pointed out this morning during one of our earlier discussions, General Keith Alexander published an op-ed that was published in Barron's yesterday. And it's the title of that is "Collective Defense is Key to Handling the Cyber Pandemic." And in that, he recommends a fundamental shift from just individual to collective defense. And thus he notes that we're all in this, and we all have a role to play in proper cybersecurity for our nation and our businesses and all of our capabilities. And earlier today, during our initial, one of our first interviews, and when asked, Chris Inglis, who's the National Cyber Director now working in the White House, endorsed General Alexander's article and its concepts. And he actually, Chris Inglis actually earlier was known to say that we all have a role to play in this effort. So I think that's another one of the growing areas of involvement that we're seeing. So Craig, if you haven't forgotten what I had earlier asked General Shaw, What's your views on cybersecurity and partnering across agencies, and how Viasat is working to achieve the kind of things that General Shaw pointed out?
Yeah, and so this is something that is burned into our consciousness, and we could never forget the cyber threat. And I agree with both of you that General Shaw said that the cyber threat is a threat to space, and realistically, that is probably the first threat to space you're going to see, rather than a kinetic or a directed energy or even a co-orbital threat to space assets. You're going to see cyber effects against these assets first, and that's going to happen every day. It probably already is. And you can't air gap networks anymore. You can't just say, here we have one network and it's not connected to anything else, because as we move towards a joint all domain command and control, or even a joint all domain comms architecture, you simply can't, if you want interoperability, you have to interconnect things. And when you interconnect things, you exponentially increase your attack surface. And so we see this every day with the networks we run. Viasat runs a global network where we have 5 of our own satellites and partner satellites as well, all interconnected to form a global network. And we literally see billions of cyber attacks a day. And our network's an unusual case compared to the defense one, because basically anybody with $50 in good credit can get on our network. And we're also connected to the internet all the time. And so we see every kind of attack there is. And we've had to deal with that. And you have to create a mix of basically commercial best practices and commercial intrusion devices. You have to follow the ISO standards and the government RMF framework standards, but you also have to create your own custom analytics and automation tools. And the value of the custom automation and the behavioral analytics is what you're getting at, General Raduege, is it's pretty easy for someone to get in. And then the real trick is preventing them from moving laterally, or preventing them from grabbing the keys to the kingdom once they're in. And that's where the behavioral analytics come in, when you're past the intrusion detection, you're past the firewall, and you have to secure your network in that way too. And this is an area where Viasat's done a lot of work on its own, and we've also partnered with the US government. We're part of the Department of Homeland Security's Enhanced Cybersecurity program. And one of the key tenets of that is there's a product that we provide called the Trusted Cyber Sensor. That's basically a SCIF in a box, and it's a modified crypto device that we can deploy in anybody's network, and it can hold our own proprietary signatures. It can also hold the Department of Homeland Security's or the NSA's classified signatures in an unclassified environment. And this is something that can be deployed on networks to give you basically the best of both in terms of commercial signatures and classified government signatures that can be deployed in any part of these networks that you have terrestrial connectivity. And this gets you basically world-class cybersecurity deployable without having to bring all the data back. And so this is an example where Viasat partnered with a government entity to provide a capability that we can deploy commercially into critical infrastructure providers. But this can also be deployed as we start building these enterprise military communications networks. And I think commercial partnerships like this are going to be the key to securing it, because cyber is the attack vector that you're going to see most often. It's the easiest one to employ. It's also the least attributable. So it's the one you're going to see. And so that's the one we have to be very concerned about.
Great points. Let me throw a question to both of you, or either of you, whoever would like to comment on it first. But another one of the big concerns now, and growing concerns, frankly, has to do with space debris and clutter. And they're becoming more and more concerning. So what short-term and long-term solutions do either of you see, and what are the consequences of not addressing this issue?
Okay, I'll go. Hey, so when it comes to space debris, I'm against it, because I think it is a problem, and it will be a problem, and we need to make sure it doesn't become out of control. And I think Craig mentioned a little bit about this topic earlier. So in the near term, we just got to stop creating more debris. And this also comes at a time when we have an interesting technological inflection point here with the emergence of proliferated low Earth orbit constellations. Hundreds to thousands of small satellites in a constellation that may bring some terrific services down to the planet in terms of broadband connectivity and maybe better remote sensing and such, but it comes with a risk. And I think in the near term, we just, as anyone who is fielding one of these constellations moves forward, to do it in a very responsible manner, right? You're very transparent about where they're operating and how you're operating them. You build into them the ability to have them re-enter the atmosphere at end of life, so they're gone. You probably don't put them at too high an altitude where if things go wrong, it's there forever. If there's ever a problem, they probably stay a little lower. So that's just the short term in terms of just being smart about how we do it. Longer term, is really what can we do about remediation, right? How can we actually clean up debris? What are mechanisms that we can do? And when we get a lot of suggestions on that here at U.S. Space Command, and we love to get them because we want to find I'll go back to, it's our area of responsibility. We feel responsible. We want to make it usable for all actors. There's usually two big questions that emerge. The first is, okay, what's the technological solution you're proposing? And what readiness level or is that? How ready is it for us? And the second is, what's the business case for it, right? How do we actually afford it? And there could be creative answers to both of those questions if we think hard enough about it. Maybe crowdsourcing is a way that you are able to finance a technological solution to get after debris remediation removal. So that's a way to start looking at it. And I look forward to any dialogue on that in the way forward, because what we don't want to do is leave for, our descendants a really cluttered and dirty environment around the planet. Let's leave it good, because that's where we're going to be going.
Great points. Craig, I'll turn it to you for some comments in the time we have left.
Yeah, and we're in violent agreement again here. I couldn't agree more with everything General Shaw just said. And I guess I'll add my perspective that prevention, especially in the short term, is the most important factor, because once we create the debris, there's a certain chance that it can become self-sustaining. So if the debris starts interacting with itself and creates more debris, you get a problem, and you get a chain reaction that's called the Kessler effect. And that can be catastrophic. And what can happen is you wind up with a bunch of very small debris, things on the order of 1 to 3 to 4 to 5 centimeters. And if you get hundreds of thousands of objects like that, you can't track them. You can't solve the problem with space domain awareness, because these things are just untrackable. And something that's moving at tens of kilometers a second of relative velocity to something else, even if it's the size of a penny and it hits a satellite, it can destroy the satellite. And then you create more debris. So it's really important we prevent the debris before it happens, because remediation is difficult too. And General Shaw touched on it very, very eloquently, that, at the lower altitudes, it tends to decay on its own. At the higher altitudes, it may be stuck up there for decades or longer. And it's quite difficult to remove it. Sure, large things like rocket bodies, you can go grab them and take them out of orbit. But if you have large numbers of objects and they're small and they're outside of the normal orbits, the delta V associated with it, there's just the difference in velocity associated with capturing these things. It's a very difficult technical problem. So hopefully we'll see some innovation in that space, pardon the pun, and we'll find ways to remove some of this stuff. But it's a really hard problem right now. And I think right now, the best approach we have is prevention, and then agreeing long-term on a set of responsible behaviors for long-term prevention. And hopefully, as time goes on, innovation will happen and we'll have a method to remediate it. But the best tool we have right now is prevention.
Well, I appreciate those comments. And when we're talking about the velocities, objects are traveling in space, I think the example that I'm aware of, and I always am reminded of, is one of our previous space shuttle missions came back with a chipped windshield because of a paint chip in space that hit it and cracked it. So that's the kind of velocities we're talking about. And of course, you're not going to be able to track every paint chip that's up there also. So the debris issue really is a major concern, and you both have addressed it very well here today. And there's probably, as General Shaw points out, he's open for discussion on what industry can bring to help in this growing problem. So thank you very much, General Shaw, Craig Miller. Great joining both of you again in this exciting discussion here today. Great fireside chat. And I'll turn it back over to our studio. David, Scott.
Thank you very much, General Raduege. Gentlemen, that was outstanding, an outstanding trifecta. All three of you were just above and beyond. So we thank you so very, very much for all you continue to do. And certainly thanks for being a part of our event today. Great to have you all here. Thanks so much.
Have a great day.
That was good stuff.
It's great stuff. And
Every,
when you say
every
above and
time I
beyond,
think,
they literally are, because they're dealing with space, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's true. You didn't
Never more
realize that?
apropos, right?
Well, I thought they were just great. It was really, it's each time I think, gee, they were pretty good. And then the next group comes on and you go, gee, they were pretty good too. It's been a great day.
As
I
you
really
said when
learned
you
a lot.
were a DJ, the hits keep coming.
Well, yeah, when I was a teenager, yep. And the hits just keep on coming.
So Harry, we got a shout out to Harry. Harry is the namesake of the Harry D. Raduege Award for
Right.
Technological Innovation and National Security.
Right.
And we, he's done so much for our nation that way. So we've come up with that award, and we presented that to James Hondo Gertz,
Okay,
the acting
okay,
Secretary
right,
of the Navy
right.
recently, who's now retired. And the plan is for our tradition is for one of the recipients to present it to the next person.
As it should be.
And yeah, so
I think that's great. I see so many organizations like that beginning to do that. Whoever the predecessor was or whoever won the award the year prior,
passes the baton.
absolutely.
Yeah, Miss America does that. Why can't we?
That's right. If Miss America's doing it,
Yeah,
it's got to be right.
That's right.
All right.